Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Deloitte's Principal and National Human Capital Offering Lead, Michael Gretzko.
Hey. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming. Sorry for the little delay in our start. Thank you for joining us here in sunny and very hot Phoenix, hopefully better than some other parts of the country. This is our 12th ever Impact, and I want to welcome you to this community of HR professionals. We're really excited about the next couple days. The theme for this year is really about innovation and disruption. Let me ask all of you, I'm sure you're facing this in your workplaces. Certainly we're facing it in ours and seeing just the tremendous opportunity that it includes. And in the spirit of that disruption, we've really taken a hard look at disrupting impact this year. And there's a couple of things you're going to see throughout the course of the week. The first is a new venue, a new city. Part of the move here was to accommodate our largest ever impact. Over 680 attendees are expected. Secondly, a new format. We've incorporated a lot of storytelling and an interactive session where you can actually see some of the human capital trends we're about to share come alive and really have the ability to interact with that technology. A new focus. We're focusing on 4 key tracks this year that will really define all of the interactions that you'll have over the course of the week. Over the next 3 days, we'll also spend time unpacking the 2019 human capital trends that we're about to release. We're looking forward to the rigorous conversation that we'll have amongst this community. And then we'll really pivot to those valuable insights and how you can take those insights back to your workplace and really lead on the workforce issues that are defining our profession and defining our organizations. To our members, I welcome you back. Thank you for coming. To our non-members, we hope that you enjoy your experience here at Impact and opt to be a part of this community of Burson members. So without further delay, I'm excited to introduce the 2019 Human Capital Trends. This year's theme is Leading the Social Enterprise, Reinvent with a Human Focus. Enjoy.
Thousands of teachers walked out of classrooms to rally in state capitals. They are demanding higher pay and increased funding for students.
Fast food giant announcing Monday it's buying a tech startup that uses artificial intelligence to craft personalized experiences for customers.
The social enterprise is here, and the disruption to the political, economic, and social fabric of our society is having a bigger impact on us than ever before. Issues such as income inequality, wages, and the role of businesses in society are all under debate, and the pressures that have driven the rise of the social enterprise are being felt around the world. The growing power of the individual, holding businesses accountable for social contribution, the decline in trust in government, the growth in cognitive technology, artificial intelligence, and automation that will require humans to work alongside machines and maximize human skills.
There are concerns about the rise of robotics and automation and what that means for the future of the workforce.
If we want to make sure that the societal gaps that exist today aren't furthered by technology, we have to put the right tools in place.
This year, organizations need to examine how they can reinvent themselves on a broad scale and change every aspect of how they interact, motivate, and create experience within their workforce.
I believe the companies that have purpose are the best companies in the world because it unites their employees, it connects the clients, but most importantly, it brings the organization onto a common plane.
Those leading the social enterprise are bringing meaning back into the workplace and a human identity back to the worker. Welcome to Leading the Social Enterprise. Reinvent with a human focus.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Deloitte's Human Capital Leader, Erica Volini.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. You know, it's funny, I've seen that video at least 5 times, and every time I see it, I just am in a state of awe. When I think about the changes that are coming into our world, when I think about the power of technology to shape our future, I am inspired. I am inspired by the changes that are in front of us. And I also need to find a way to wrap my head around the level of change that's happening and to think about what is truly fueling that change. What are the drivers that are bringing us to this new place? And through our research, we have identified 3 major drivers of that change, starting with the power of the individual. Individuals today have a greater voice than any generation that's come before them. They have opinions that they want to share on political issues, organizational issues, issues that are impacting society. And they have a platform from which to share that voice, and they do so on a very frequent basis. Case in point, last year, the US experienced 20 major work stoppages impacting over 485,000 workers, the most we have seen since 2007. The power of the individual is here, and it is here to stay. The second major driver is the decline in trust in government. And last year, the Edelman Trust Index showed us a big decline in that level of trust. And this year, the statistics were even more sobering, with 1 in every 5 of us saying the system is not working on our behalf. But the data didn't stop there, because what it also showed is that 58% of the general population of employees say that they look to their employer to be a trustworthy source of information on societal issues, putting the organization front and center as it relates to trust. And the third driver is one that we're all familiar with. It's the influx of technology and our understanding of the impact that that technology can have. Now, I don't know how many of you watched the Super Bowl, but there were 98 million viewers around the world, so I assume some of you are sitting in this room here. But what struck me most about the Super Bowl was not Tom Brady's dominant performance, which was, of course, impressive, nowhere near as impressive as Tiger Woods winning at Augusta on Sunday. I mean, wow, that was incredible. But what struck me were the commercials that played during the game, and how many of those commercials focused on the power of technology and its ability to shape our world. These drivers are the reason why we have coined a phrase, the social enterprise, to reflect a major shift that we're seeing in the way organizations approach work. Because what we recognize is that because of these drivers, because of the increase in the power of the individual, because of the decline in trust in government and the rise in the trust of organizations, and because of this influx of technology, organizations can't operate as traditional business enterprises anymore. Organizations have to work differently. They have to move from an enterprise focus to an ecosystem focus through increased collaboration with the external environment. And internally, they need to make a shift as well. They need to move from being siloed and functionally oriented to working symphonically as a team across organizational boundaries. Because today's challenges require more collaboration and more engagement than we've ever seen before. And the good news is that organizations are responding to this call to action. And they're responding with a focus on corporate responsibility, social impact, and ultimately, purpose. Purpose is important because as we think back to those drivers, purpose is what gives those individuals with those strong voices something to hold on to. It is answering the call for organizations to do more in the face of the decline in the trust in government. And it is giving people a lens into the mission and values of the organization at a time when it feels like all we talk about these days is technology. But a focus on purpose isn't enough. See, purpose is about and for the organization. And that is precisely where it can fall short. It inspires, it guides us, it gives us a framework for the future, but it does not address the day-to-day realities that the worker is facing in their jobs. And it doesn't answer the question that workers have, which is, what is my role in the future of work going to be? That question can only be answered by focusing on meaning. See, meaning is humanistic. Meaning is individual. Meaning is personal. And in today's workplace, it is the human element that needs to be addressed. I know you're probably all surprised to see a picture of a baby up on the screen, but you see, meaning has taken on a whole new definition for me. because 6 months ago, I gave birth to my first child, a son named Robbie. And after 20+ years of being at Deloitte, I can tell you that I know what our organization's purpose is. It's to make an impact that matters. And for 20 years, I have rallied around that purpose. I love that purpose. I have shared that purpose as a leader with our employees. And I admire our leaders like our global CEO who put it out there every single day and celebrate it so that all of us know what it is. But when I returned from maternity leave, I realized I needed something more. I needed to know what my place was after 6 months of being away. More than 10 times the amount of time I had been away from the firm before. Did I have a place? And was I going to feel comfortable in that place? I needed to know what the value of the work I was doing was, because every single minute I spent at work was a minute away from my son. And I knew I needed to understand my path moving forward, because all of a sudden, my future was not just about me. And as a leader, I realized that I also needed to provide that sense of meaning to my employees. And I recognized that bringing meaning back to work, that is truly the organizational mandate of our time. Now, not every worker is going on maternity leave or paternity leave or experiencing a major life event. I know that. But every single worker is going through massive change right now at work. That is because technology, whether it's coming in the form of AI or cognitive or robotics, is coming into the workplace faster than ever. And it is impacting our identities at work. It can nudge us on how we should behave. It can use algorithms to calculate how we should do work that maybe we've been doing for 5 or 10 years. It can survey us to understand what we're thinking, and it can sense what we're going to do next. And that technology is powerful. That technology is so good. It is what is going to move our world forward in ways that we cannot even imagine. But it also will force us to address the most important question that organizations need to ask themselves if they truly want to capitalize on the power of that technology. The question I talked about earlier: how can we bring meaning back into work? Now, meaning is a tricky concept. I bet if I asked all of you around this room, I would get 650 different answers in terms of what meaning is about. It can be hard to define, and it can seem incredibly ambiguous, which is why, as any good consultant would, I sought out a way to make meaning tangible, some framework, some way of thinking about meaning so I could relay it to all of you. And I found that framework in Maslow's hierarchy, something that's been around for over 70 years, invented in 1943. And I'm not using this framework to philosophize about whether each of these 5 areas should go in sequential levels. And I'm not going to talk about whether the narrowing of the pyramid makes sense and whether some people will never self-actualize, which, by the way, is not something that I believe. And I'm not going to enter the debate that was started a couple of days ago about whether Maslow actually invented this hierarchy. None of that is relevant. What is relevant about this hierarchy is that these 5 levels help us to define meaning in a tangible way. And it also helps us to pinpoint where we need to focus if we want to provide meaning back to work. As I break down the hierarchy, we could start with the physiological. I don't believe that the physiological is where we're going to find meaning. It is incredibly important. In the context of work, the physiological gives us a place to go every day, a workplace. It gives us a paycheck. That's incredibly important. But it is not where meaning can be found. The same can be said for safety. Whether it's the security of your job or whether it's the physical safety in your workplace, safety is also foundational, but it does not provide meaning. See, where meaning can be found, and in a minute I'm going to show you why, but where meaning can be found is in those next 3 levels of belonging, esteem, and ultimately self-actualization. So let's start with belonging. Hopefully this image is conjuring up something for you of this idea of how machines and humans can come together. But machines and humans working together is not something that everyone accepts. If you go on Twitter or you look in the newspaper or you go onto the internet, there is no way you will not bump into some article or some blog talking about the robots are coming and they're taking your job. The robot apocalypse is here, some might say. But I don't believe that. See, I believe in the power of machines and humans working together. And that technology, if used appropriately, can augment those essential human skills that are so necessary in the workplace. And I think we're seeing example after example of the power of this collaboration every single day. As it relates to esteem, we have to understand that it's not just about money. What's important and what's most important to workers today isn't money, although it is important, okay? It is the value of their work to them. And that is why it is so important that in the context of all this technology coming into the workplace, that we take a step back to reimagine work. Work is going to change. The processes, the activities, the outcomes, they're all going to shift. So we have an opportunity to rethink, to reimagine work. But let's not go into the corners of our organization and reimagine work with the whiteboard and the door closed. Let's engage our workers in reimagining that work. Let's help them unlock their own personal creativity to change the way that work is being done, to leverage the power of technology. There is nothing more valuable than that, and it is a tremendous way to provide esteem and ultimately meaning to workers. And finally, self-actualization. A phrase that I know many of you may say, I want to stay away from that. Self-actualization sounds very theoretical. But to make it tactical, the easiest parallel I could think about is the experience. It is the experience at work that enables workers to reach their highest potential. And over the course of the past 4 years, we have done extensive research to define what we believe the attributes are of the simply irresistible experience. Meaningful work, growth opportunities, supportive management, trust in leadership, and a positive work environment. Now, we understand those attributes, but through our research and our Global Human Capital's Trend Study, we found gaps in each of these areas. Only 53% of our survey respondents believe they are effective or very effective at creating meaningful work. Only 43% believe they are effective at providing the right opportunities for growth. Not just opportunities for growth, but the right opportunities. The opportunities that are personalized to each individual worker based on where they are today and where they want to go moving forward. 46% of our respondents told us their managers resist internal mobility. Now, in today's tight labor market, where it is so hard to find talent externally, internal mobility is one of the best sources of talent. It is also one of the best ways to help people reach their fullest potential because it gives them the opportunity to do more, to do different things, to learn different skills. And when 46% of organizations tell us their managers are resisting it, we have to acknowledge that there's a problem and that this is not supportive management. And it's not going to help with self-actualization. And ultimately, it will hinder our ability to provide meaning at work. In the context of trust and leadership, only 30% of our respondents believe they're effectively developing leaders to meet the evolving challenges. Because tomorrow's challenges are different than today's. Yes, it's still important to manage the day-to-day operations at work, but it's equally important to learn how to manage a workforce that is diverse. And diverse not only in race and gender and ethnicity, but diverse in perspectives around work. These are new attributes that tomorrow's leaders have to manage the workforce of today. Underpinning all of this is the technology. and the technology enabling a positive work environment. And yet, despite all this technology that's coming into the workplace, as I look out here, I know that we have many organizations who have implemented new systems, new technologies, new tools to make the work environment better. And yet, only 38% of you said you're satisfied or very satisfied with work-related tools and technologies. Now, some of you are maybe asking, should we just close up shop? Erica, are you telling us that the problems are so insurmountable that we should just give up? Absolutely not. What I see and what I take away from this data are two things. One, we are all in this together. Our Human Capital Trends Survey was completed by 10,000 respondents across 119 countries. These challenges are global challenges, and we have to work as a global community to find answers. And number two, we have an opportunity in front of us, an amazing opportunity to think differently about the way in which work happens today. And what our research is showing us is that we have to do it differently. We have to reinvent with a human focus. Now, we chose the words reinvent with a human focus deliberately, and I want to talk you through the reasons why. Reinvent. Reinvent represents the how we're going to make this change ahead of us. And we chose this word for a reason, because to truly change the areas that we talked about, we can't just tinker at the edges. We need to drive fundamental change. And we need to do so by leveraging the power of technology that's at our fingertips. In the same way that technology has changed the way in which we work and the way in which we live. In the way in which the printing press changed how we communicate with one another. In the way that the iPad changed how we access information. And in the way the technologies of the future are going to change the way we live and work in ways that we cannot even yet imagine. Human. Human represents the why. And the answer is because it's that human element that ultimately matters. It's the human element that has proven to be the reasons why we haven't seen the gains in productivity that we expected to see in the fourth industrial revolution. It's not the technology that's lacking. In fact, as you could see in this graph, technology continues to enter our world at an exponential pace. And it's not individuals. Every one of you seated here has proven that you have the ability to adapt to this technology as rapidly as it comes into your world. But where the gap starts to exist, where those productivity gains start to disappear, is at the organizational level. Because organizations haven't figured out how to combine the power of that technology with human potential. That is where the opportunity lies. And it's not just our research that's telling us this. If we go back to those Super Bowl commercials that I talked about earlier, what struck me was not just that they highlighted the power of technology and its ability to shape the world, but that each of them reinforced the importance of the human element. Whether it was the TurboTax commercial with the father telling his robo-child, hey, I'm sorry, you can't be a live CPA because you don't have emotions. Or whether it was Pringles showcasing a smart home device who only wanted a soul to be able to taste those chips. Organizations are telling us that the human element matters. Focus. Focus represents the where. And as we go back to meaning in the areas of belonging, esteem, and self-actualization, we realize that the where needs to be broader than HR. It needs to include all of us. It needs to be about the workforce and what the future of the workforce is going to be. It needs to be about the organization and what the future of the organization is going to look like. And it needs to be about HR and how the future of HR is going to help to shape the future that we're all going to live in at work. And it needs to be owned by the entire organization and every single leader, from the CEO to the CFO, to the CIO, to the CMO, and ultimately to the CHRO. It is a phenomenal opportunity for organizations like yours to work together symphonically. an element that truly characterizes what it means to be a social enterprise. As it relates to the future of the workforce, providing meaning implies creating a sense of belonging that's missing in an age where we continue to talk about robots taking our jobs and workers are wondering, where's their place? It means recognizing that the fastest growing segment of today's workforce, the alternative workforce, can't be kept on the sidelines because it's now mainstream and we need to manage it accordingly. It means expanding the way in which we look at jobs to enable workers with different skill sets and different experiences to come together in expanded roles, something we're calling super jobs. If we think back to what drives belonging, it's a sense that you have a place and your job represents your place in the organization. So when we expand the aperture on jobs, when we make them broader, when we have them incorporate more responsibilities, we're not only telling people they have a place, but their place matters. It means recognizing that people leave managers, not companies. And so we need to create leaders in the 21st century who can not only execute traditional activities like managing day-to-day operations, making decisions, and managing the bottom line, all of which are incredibly important, but that we need leaders who can embrace new opportunities and have new competencies, like leading through ambiguity, being tech savvy, and handling national and cultural differences. Because you see, the future of the workforce is complex, it's diverse, and it's hungry. And it requires leaders that are going to help it to reach its full potential. That's what belonging is really about. As it relates to the future of the organization, providing meaning implies bringing a sense of esteem to every single worker. It means elevating our efforts around the employee experience to extend beyond work processes and to focus on the meaning of the work itself, thereby targeting the most personal and most human question that can exist in the workplace: am I making a difference? It means recognizing that just as our kids get a great sense of accomplishment when they win the game as a team, that same concept of teamwork applies to organizational performance. You know, I think back, having a child has made me reflect on my own childhood. And even though I wasn't particularly athletic, I remember playing on the soccer team, and I remember winning as a team. Teams are embedded in our organizations today as the traditional hierarchy goes away. But having teams is not enough. We need to figure out a way to reward those teams, to incent them to work together, to give those teams a sense of meaning. That's when we're going to impact organizational performance at a higher level. And it means finally closing the gap on rewards. Even though earlier I told you money wasn't what matters most to workers, it still matters. And we need to make sure that to drive a sense of esteem, our reward strategy is tied inextricably to our organizational strategy. So that when workers go out there and they focus on their work and they get their paycheck at the end of the day, they can say, yes, I feel valued. I feel valued for what I did, and I feel valued in a way that's personal to me. We have so much data and insights at our fingertips. Why aren't we using that data to help predict what rewards are going to be best for what workers, and to help understand what truly motivates them? That's how we're going to recognize the potential of the power of technology and use it to reinvent with a human focus. And finally, as it relates to the future of HR, providing meaning implies a path towards self-actualization, one that HR shouldn't and can't own by themselves, but has the ability, and more importantly, the responsibility to shape and lead in the future. It means changing the way in which we think about recruiting by focusing on accessing capabilities, not just acquiring talent. Those capabilities can be found in multiple places. They could be found through technology. It can be found through the alternative workforce. It could be found through full-time employees. It could be found through retirees. But no matter how it's found, it will expand the aperture of how we think about capabilities, how to bring them into our organization, and how to use them to move the organization forward. It means looking at learning not as training on a single topic or function, but as a new way of working, one that embeds the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and abilities not only into the flow of work, but into the flow of life. There is nothing more personal than learning in today's world. As individuals are living longer and living 100-year lives, people can have 50 to 60-year careers. And in the context of an organization typically lasting only 15, that means individuals are going to have to go to multiple organizations across their career. And how are they going to do that? By knowing that they have learned the skills that are going to keep them employed not only today, but tomorrow and into the future. That is how we're going to help workers self-actualize, how we're going to help them fulfill their highest potential. And it means recognizing that in today's incredibly tight labor market, where we have more job openings than unemployed people, we cannot just rely on the external talent market, but we have to look within our own organizations where the talent exists and give our current workers the opportunity to grow, to develop, to take on new challenges. And finally, it means embracing the power of technology to drive change, but also acknowledging that with the exponential rate of change in technology, it can only serve as a launch pad, not as an end state destination. The word reinvent represented the how. Human represents the why. Focus represents the where. And these 10 trends that I just talked about represent the what. What we together need to reinvent to ignite human focus, to instill a sense of meaning, and to exist in a digital age where profits meet purpose, talent trumps technology, and the social enterprise reigns supreme. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to delve into these trends a little bit more and invite our esteemed panel to the stage. I feel like I need a drink of water after that. While I'm taking a drink of water, let me introduce our wonderful panel here. We have Brad Denny, who's one of the primary authors of our Human Capital Trends report this year. We have Heather Stockton, who's our global leader for human capital, and is going to share with us the implications of some of these trends around the world. David Mallon, who's our chief analyst for our Burson organization. And finally, although I don't think you need introductions at this conference, Josh Burson, who not only was a primary author on our trends this year, but has been a significant contributor over the years in terms of how we think about work and the workforce. Thank you, Brad, Heather, David, and Josh for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to start talking about the difference between purpose and meaning. I think a lot of people heard what I said, but probably are still thinking, is there really a difference? Brad, maybe you could start by explaining why should leaders think about meaning as less of an aspiration and more about a critical business imperative?
Sure. Thanks, Erica. When I think of meaning, it's really, and you touched on it, I thought, very well, it's about the belonging, the self-esteem aspects. It's about driving that into the fundamental nature of the organization. It's making it personal, things such as personalized rewards, so that I, as an employee, as a worker, feel like I'm being rewarded in ways that truly mean something to me. It might be very different than what it means to you. It's things like lifelong learning or learning the flow of life, so that as I work day to day in the very nature of what I do, maybe it's not pulling me out to do training, but it's learning about new skills, new things as part of my job. So every day I get better. I get a little bit more marketable, but I get better. That creates meaning. Ultimately, it's about mobility, talent mobility, knowing that I can grow what I do within the company in which I work. Right? So these are all very personal, and meaning is personal, whereas you talked about purpose. Purpose is really organizational. And a little plug, if I can, for the Human Capital Trends app, which, by the way, if you all just go It's trendsapp.deloitte.com. It has the entire report out there and a lot of really great videos. We have a whole huge team behind us that pulls this together. And Michael Dell, I think, sums up the difference probably far better than I could, talking about at Dell what the difference is between purpose and meaning. And so let's get some hits on our app, and you can see that video.
You know, I was going to ask you what that bridge was. You did very well. Okay. You almost lost me on the app, but you brought it back with Michael Dell. I like it. So Heather, as the global human capital leader, can you give us a sense as to how this is being translated around the world? Is this just a US point of view, or do you see this translating globally?
Absolutely not. I mean, when you look around the world and you look at the whole issue of sort of decreasing trust in government, you look at the yellow vests, you look at what's happening around the world, not only in the US. You look at productivity declining, and you look at the rate that technology is coming in. Why isn't productivity increasing? And part of what needs to happen is, we've got an example of 4 companies are spending more than $2 billion in reskilling both people inside their organization and outside their organization. And the reason they're doing that is that they have a responsibility to prepare their workforce. They need to do that, but they also have to prepare the workforce coming in. And as you think about people coming into an organization, it's easier for them, as Erica said, to find a job than it is outside than it is inside. And so organizations have to marry this whole concept of shareholder returns with purpose and then meaning. Why is someone doing the job, and how do you personalize it for them? And it doesn't matter where you go in the world, everybody's struggling with this. The struggles are different based on what's happening in the economy. But this is a call to action. It's no longer good enough to just focus on shareholder returns.
There's, as you were talking through and talking about the investment in learning of those 4 companies, last week Michael, Stefan, and I were speaking at the Next Gen CHRO Academy down at Deloitte University, and we were in that awkward spot talking about the 2018 trends and not trying to talk about the 2019 because they weren't out, and found out we can tap dance fairly well. But one of the things that came up as we were asking companies there what they've done as social enterprises, unbeknownst to them, they were actually talking about meaning. And one of them had a phenomenal example. They're a global company that sources seasonal workforces for companies. So they're literally around the entire globe, massive workforce, and they had a tremendous turnover problem. Yeah. Hundreds of percent, not 100%, hundreds of percent. And what they did is they started to bring in continuing education for the workers, wherever they happen to be, life skills, skills that would help them, yes, in what they're doing, but also more broadly. And what they found is it became so meaningful to those employees that even if they didn't come back the following year, they self-recruited their replacements from their own villages. So that massive issue that they had that impacted shareholder value suddenly disappeared because they were driving meaning into their employees' lives.
I love that story, and I bet if we polled the audience here, we would find there are many other organizations that can demonstrate something similar. So I want to switch gears for a minute and Josh, tap into a bit of your expertise around one of the concepts we presented called super jobs. Now, super jobs aren't just a nice term we created, right? They're something that we see evolving in the workplace. And it's interesting because it's a little bit different than I think what people are feeling, right? All this AI and cognitive and robotics technology, a lot of people are talking about it's going to do away with jobs altogether, right? The robot apocalypse is coming. How do you contrast that fear and that call to action around robots taking our jobs with the advent of super jobs potentially emerging?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear to all of us that all of those scare tactics that came from the Oxford study were wrong. That didn't happen. There's so many jobs, we don't have enough people. I'm going to share some of that data tomorrow. And the more automation that takes place, and we've seen this in the data, the more human-like the jobs become. So the social communication, complex thinking, what we call soft skills are becoming more and more and more valuable. And I'm going to show you guys some data on this tomorrow. And so these super jobs are jobs that we don't recognize necessarily in our job descriptions. We don't have them in our job catalogs. They're sometimes called coordinators or analysts or designers, or they're jobs that allow people to use data and use information coming out of these machines to do new things. And it's happening across, in every industry. In healthcare, the people that used to read the x-rays are now interpreting the data and doing smarter things because the machine is telling them things they didn't know before. So it's really a wonderful thing for all of us because these jobs that are being created are better. Now, the big issue is how do you get there from here if you're in one of the routine jobs, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So it's a pretty interesting thing, and I think it's great that we're past this discussion that all the jobs are going away. I think we can stop reading those articles.
We could stop reading them, but I don't know if people are going to stop writing them because I just saw one yesterday that
Well,
said,
I'm going to give you guys some data tomorrow on why that's not a problem, but I'm not going to give you the secret yet.
Okay, I love
some
it.
Stuff
Tee us
coming.
up for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I think it's about telling a different story too. One of the things I love about the super job concept is we're getting, let's just put, since let's say the assembly line, we've worked in organizations where we essentially broke the story up into separate parts, and most of us we weren't involved in the whole story. But these super jobs are now returning to a place where we actually can be part of the beginning, the middle, and end, and we can see what it is we're doing, which meaning brings us back to that meaning.
I totally agree. And I think one of the questions that people in the audience might be thinking is, why are super jobs emerging now? I mean, is this just about piling work on top of work and getting us back to the overwhelmed employee? What's the difference now that we're seeing?
So I think the big difference now is technology is enabling these super jobs. A great example would be, a bank looking at investment advisors and saying, part of their job is to actually help understand future income and are people employable. And so they're looking at taking the investment advisor skills and marrying that with career coaching so that they can actually look at the people that they're going to work with and understand how they're employable. We're going to see more and more of that as technology enables us to do things differently. Another great example would be a large energy company using driverless trucks, and they sort of happened upon this by accident after they'd implemented this. But what they found was when they had the driverless vehicles in their minds, the actual best people to work on the technology, in the command center were the people that drove the trucks before. And again, what you naturally go to is the people that have the technical competency, but you wouldn't imagine that somebody had truck driving skills, would be the best person. So I think for all of us, we need to look at how technology is enabling us to take very different skills and actually create these super jobs.
It's interesting because we talk about jobs in different industries, but I actually think some of the biggest opportunities for super jobs are actually within the HR function itself. And I know, David, we had talked about one the other day. Yeah. I'd love for you to share that.
So I get a chance to go out and talk to a lot of companies about how we're reinventing HR with a human focus. And there's a lot we're going to talk about this week, this notion of what's the future of the operating model in the HR function. And one of the ideas that's been floated around is what if there's a role in the HR function, which is a productivity product manager for a workforce segment. So rather than having somebody who's only seeing through the separate HR lenses we're used to dealing with of learning and talent acquisition and so forth, someone who, for a particular audience, let's say salespeople, they own soup to nuts, the productivity of that group, and they're collecting, like any good product manager, they're collecting all the data to know about that audience, know what makes them tick, what's in their environment, to know in advance where they're going to need some help. How do we keep them as productive and well and the like as possible? You're connecting a lot of dots, and again, letting this one role take advantage of technology to see a much bigger picture.
And in the report itself, we actually talk about another opportunity for super jobs within HR, which I've seen emerging, which is this idea of the experience architect. Right? If we think about traditional shared services organizations, you kind of have tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, and then you have the business partners. And everyone's focusing on a portion of the experience. But technology is allowing us to bring that together. And I think the future of shared services or operational services, we're going to see these experience architects evolve in HR that allow these HR individuals to look across the entire end-to-end experience for a given workforce segment, similar to what you're talking about. I mean, these are the types of opportunities that get me excited, because if super jobs come into play, and Josh, you alluded to this, not only does it give our workers more meaning, because it gives them more opportunity for advancement and more room to grow, but it actually creates a sense of urgency in terms of investing in skills of lower wage workers, which is another societal issue we need to address.
Well, and it gets into the issue of leadership, but I know is one of the things we're going to talk about, is that we have to give people the flexibility to move from the role they're in into this new hybrid, super job, high value role. And actually we got a bunch of stuff in the way preventing us from doing that. What was it, 60% of something, employees say their managers won't let them change jobs. It was up there. I mean, this stuff's, we're a little bit part of the problem in HR, and I think we have to be part of the solution. So that's one of the reasons that I think this issue of trust exists, is people want to make sure their company will give them the opportunity to move where they want to go.
You know, it's fascinating. As I was preparing this presentation, I said, well, let me come up with just a few statistics that tell us that belonging and esteem and self-actualization are problems. And it actually turned out that my biggest issue was there were too many statistics to make that point. And some of the statistics, like the one you mentioned, 56% of organizations say their managers resist internal mobility. That is jarring when you actually think about it.
Right.
I mean, here we are in this war for talent, knowing we have to move people around, and yet, in addition to broken processes and broken technology, which is there in the internal mobility space, you have your managers actually being a barrier.
Well, and I don't think that's anybody's fault. I think we actually taught them to do that. In maybe the Impact 10 years ago, we were talking about that. Because we taught them, and I went to a company that told me this, that your job as a manager is to sponsor your people and to manage their careers for them. And now the people are saying, I don't want your opinion. I know what I want to do. I want to go interview for that job. You're in the way, or give me a hand. And that's the new role of management and leadership, is to empower people to find their mission and their purpose in the role, in the right organization, in that role in the organization. That's a big difference from management stuff that we taught people not too long ago.
It's a huge difference, and the incentive structure isn't supporting it. I mean, our survey found, and I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, that our rewards are not based on teams, and they're not based on incentivizing people to move around. And yet, every organization is trying to become team-centric, and every organization is trying to become mobile. That puts the problem really into context.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about, we talked about leadership, we talked about rewards, we hit on super jobs. We actually didn't hit on our #1 trend this year, which is learning. David, we just had this whole conversation around meaning. And with that in mind, I'd like to understand what you think about learning. Self-actualization is really all about learning when it comes down to it. Why do you think learning is emerging as the top trend? And why and how can we recode learning into the flow of life?
Sure. So, well, Josh just touched on a little bit, which is our people are starving for, especially, well, let's just step back. Self-actualization. What is that about? It's about each of us in our mind's eye has a sense of kind of our ideal self, and how can we get there? And we want our organization to help us get there. And even more so, we want our organization to be part of how we get there, right? And so it's not surprising that from an individual perspective, our folks are crying out for this kind of support and opportunity. From the organization's perspective, we want this mobility. So we want to be able to know that we have the right people to put into the right roles. So it's not surprising from an organizational perspective that organizations are crying out, realizing that the entire apparatus for how we grow skills is just not doing what it's supposed to do. So you put those two things together, and yet, learning in the flow of life. Guess what? Learning was already in life. We learn every day. We learn all the time. It's the organization waking up to the fact that we as individuals are constantly learning. But let me put it this way. Even today's hyper-threaded career world, you're only change job titles every once in a while. But every day, every week, you have moments that are career determinant. You have moments that have an actual material effect on your ability to grow. The problem is that the 99% of them, you aren't aware of when they happen. So you don't know if those moments are actually going to help you get where you want to go. And the organization really doesn't know that they're going to help you get where they want you to go. So how do we, as an organization, help the individual and the team and the manager and the wider work groups to just be mindful about all those moments? and when we do need to give you a resource, how do we get to know your world so well that we anticipate where you're going to need something, and we stage resources around you so basically you think we're a mind reader and you stub your toe on it when you need it, right? That's recoding learning in the flow of life. We have to be careful because it's not about consumption. It's about understanding where it is we all collectively and individually want to go and being intentional and mindful of how we get there.
You know, it's interesting. There's a parallel we drew in the trends report to DevOps.
Right.
And I don't know how many of you are familiar with DevOps, but DevOps is a term that came into the world of IT and talked about the shift from a traditional waterfall approach to one that is more agile in the way that you do development of technology. And we said, why wouldn't you apply that same DevOps approach to learning and create something that, in a cute way, we term dev work? The idea that there has to be this intersection between work and learning. So to your point, it's not, oh, I need to learn, let me go out to this LMS and go purchase content or find the right module, but instead it's, wow, this learning just appeared. I stubbed my toe on this perfect learning for the work I'm doing right now. And Josh, you just wrote a great blog about the emergence of learning experience platforms, which I think are enabling that shift.
Well, I want to make 2 points. One is, as David knows very well, this learning the flow of life is about culture and having an organization that gives people the time to learn and stop and talk about what didn't work out. So that's one thing we always get back to that. And then the other thing that's really changed, and you're going to hear about this, I'm sure, at the conference, is we haven't locked up the learning in the LMS anymore. And I think this is a really revolutionary thing that's happening for those of you that are in L&D, is we now have tools that make it as easy as going to Google or YouTube to find learning inside of your company, and that's only happened in the last couple of years. So there's a combination of the cultural issues, is do people have the time and are they rewarded to learn? Are we going to discuss the mistakes? And can I find the content when I need it? And we're there now, so we can really fix this.
Totally agree. So we hit on a little bit internal mobility, but I want to talk about that some more because it's fascinating, and we see this in the U.S. and Heather, I believe it's happening globally. The talent markets are tight. I mean, they're incredibly tight. The latest jobs report showed the number of job openings compared to the number of unemployed. Unemployment rates at an all-time low. So the war for talent rages on, and I assume you see that globally as well.
It's everywhere you go, you know, the problem is organizations have not opened up the aperture around moving people around and making that just part of the DNA, and they're still spending so much money on bringing people in and exiting people out. And you go to school and to learn to work. Well, now you need to work to learn, and so you need to create the environment where you have an organization where everything you do is about learning and experience, and it's just not happening fast enough. And when things are good is really when organizations need to do that, because the war is raging. There's more jobs than there are people. And it is affecting business outcomes all over the world. It affects us at Deloitte globally, where we can't bring people in fast enough to meet demand.
So we talked about one reason why internal mobility is hard, and that's the managers. What are the other issues that are plaguing us as it relates to internal mobility? Why can't we move past this issue?
So I think there's a couple of them. You touched on one there, the culture. When you think about it, we've created organizations, and Josh and David, you guys hit on this too, where managers are really encouraged to perform and make sure their groups perform well. That's how they're evaluated. So as a manager, I'm going to let somebody go and take a different job. They're my best person. That's kind of counterintuitive there. So that the culture, the rewards don't align there. One of the other aspects is most organizations we found don't actually have processes in place for their workers to go and find other roles in the organization, unless it's for very senior level or geographic type cases of global mobility, right? Truly global mobility. So there's no internal job market for them to go see. They can't find them, and when they do, there is no process to do that. So it's really become this cultural and structural imperative blocking from doing it, which it should be pretty easy because you've got your best folks already that know the culture of your company, your organization.
Right.
They might need a little bit of fine-tuning here and there, a little bit of learning to get to the next point, but it's far cheaper if you can find somebody close and move them to the other location, the other spot, the other job, the other role, than to actually go to the outside, get somebody untested who might or might not exist, and 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 other companies are looking for that same person. So it's really, at the end of the day, that culture and those structural barriers that are in place.
So does this mean talent acquisition is over? I mean, David, we just produced our latest Burson maturity model around talent acquisition. What do we see evolving in that area?
Well, certainly picking up on this wider topic of meaning, I think we see organizations realizing that they have to be looking for different things. They have to be looking for people, looking for things like mindset and culture, almost as, if not more so than they look for traditional notions of skill and competency. But that said, I think this connects it back to the super jobs topic as well. We're slowly, through the use of these new technologies, which are not just reinventing the rest of work, they're actually reinventing the acquisition function as well. We're using these new technologies to help us better understand what good is when we find it and what it is we're looking for in the first place, to break down work, to think about work differently as outcome, to separate work design from role design and so on, all those things all in. Because here's the thing, for as long as we've been hiring people, we've been lazy. And we've been using proxies to know if someone was good at something. That's why your hiring managers tell you they have to have a certain degree from a certain university, they have to have 10 years of experience, they have to have done this, this, and this, the so-called purple squirrel, right? The problem is if that's what we're looking for, we're never going to find them, right? That's our challenge. But now we're using these new technologies, thinking about work differently. It allows us to recognize what actually will make someone successful to grow a certain capability, and to expand even what we even mean by capability. So we move from scarcity to abundance. We actually have a much better chance of actually finding what we need.
There's a great example when we were writing the report that we came across. There was this, and I don't remember the name right now, but an AI technology platform in sourcing for candidates that, as it was run, it found that specifically in sales manager type roles, and to your point, we've been lazy, right? We've said sales managers must have college degrees, right? That's just a given. Well, the AI proved out that high school graduates without college were incredibly successful when they had certain other characteristics. Right. And think about that, it dramatically opens up the lens to a potential pool. It's a very tangible opportunity.
Yeah, I was I have one example on this. I was just with the head of HR at Bertelsmann last week, and they did this big assessment of digital skills, and they're a publishing company, so everybody needs to be digital all over the place. And they found out that they had, thousands and thousands of roles that needed digital skills. So they said, okay, let's go hire people. There aren't that many to hire. There's no way we're ever going to hire that many people. So then they did another project, and they went back and they assessed the college degrees, the current skills in the workforce. Sure, they have all sorts of math majors, they have all sorts of people that know technology, scientists, people who studied engineering. They found out that within 6 to 9 months, they could create almost all the roles they needed internally, but they had to move people out of these siloed groups. So that forced the CHRO to basically knock some heads together and the senior leaders and say, we're going to have to move some of your people out of these groups. That's what companies need to do.
Absolutely. It's behavioral change, it's cultural change, and it's also approaching the issue symphonically, right? To talk about our #1 trend last year was the emergence of the symphonic C-suite, right? Last year we found 89% of our respondents said their C-suite rarely, if ever, works together. I think Josh nearly fell out of his chair.
That was really a shocker.
When he saw that statistic.
It's not much better this year.
And 83% this year. So we've seen 6% movement. I don't think we should all be celebrating yet. Well, at least we're trending in the right direction, although there wasn't much more room to get worse. But this idea of working symphonically across all these issues is absolutely key. So we've...
When you think about purpose and meaning, and you think about how many people in the world that we live in now may or may not have access to education, right? The divide is getting greater and greater. We're seeing more companies around the world actually tap into younger students, bring them into the organization, and actually give them their education at a company. I think we're going to see more and more of that, and talk about giving, defining purpose and creating meaning for these individuals. I just think that's part of what we're going to have to do to solve some of this.
Yeah, no question about it. Education has to be addressed. So we've talked about learning, we've talked about leadership, we've talked about jobs, we've talked about rewards. Almost everything in the organization, it feels like we're saying it needs to change. You guys are probably leaving saying, headline, Deloitte says, change everything. That's not that easy, and that's not what we're saying. But we are saying reinvention is necessary. Heather, give us some perspective on how an organization can get started with this incredibly daunting task in front of them.
So 2 comments. I do think it actually starts with everybody in this room, myself included. I think you need to chart your path around your own reinvention. I think that's really, really important, and too many of us do not do it. It doesn't matter what stage you are in your career. And I think the second thing is you've got to pick something and completely recode it. We are tinkering everywhere. We're doing small fixes everywhere. I call it the cottage industry of trying RPA and trying AI. We have to stop that. We have to actually pick something that matters to our business and actually recode it end to end. That's where I would start.
I think that's great advice. So unfortunately, we're at our end of our time for our panel. But David, I wanted to end with you because this is a big topic and there's a lot to discuss. And everyone here is going to be around for the next 3 days. So I'd love for you to share, how is this conversation around reinventing with a human focus going to continue?
Absolutely. Well, so first off, I'll take this is my first time on the stage with you all to welcome you to our 12th Impact. I think you're going to find, we always love it when a plan comes together, right? I think you're going to find over the next 2 days the opportunity to go deeper on pretty much everything that we've talked about here today. I think you're gonna get the opportunity to hear from us and the Burson team in our research for example, how we are reinventing the HR function specifically with a human focus. You're going to hear about our research with regards to organizations and teaming and the organization performance to team sport. And you're going to hear our latest work on what it means to bring meaning to your workforce and a workforce experience. You can do all of that. Of course, we have a tremendous slate this year of you all coming and sharing your stories on all these topics as well. So you have plenty of opportunities to do that. And of course, we try to always create a lot of space for you to network and to connect with each other. So I encourage you to do it. I think you're across the board, you will not be starved for lots of opportunities to look at how you can reinvent. And we do use that word intentionally to the point there is that it's, for example, even on something like a topic like performance management, where a couple of years ago, you might be forgiven to think, oh yeah, we've been there, done that, we've all worked in performance management. And in actuality, we're finding that's not the case at all. Many of you went and jumped off cliffs, and now you're trying to figure out how to get out of the hole you jumped into because we did think we could just fix it incrementally. We thought we could just test a few things. And no, in fact, what we really do need is a performance process that is human. And so, those are just one example amongst many where you will get a chance to engage on the topic. So lots to look forward to.
So you've heard it here first. 2019 Global Human Capital Trends Report, nearly 10,000 respondents across 119 countries, all telling us that in order to lead in the age of the social enterprise, we must reinvent with a human focus. We must take all those timeless human capital topics like learning, leadership, rewards, jobs, experience, and we need to leverage the power of technology to bring the human element back to work. I look forward to continuing the discussion, and I want to thank our panel for a great 40 minutes just now. And with that, enjoy the conference.